You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 11th of August 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing, in association with Addis. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme, we unpick the historic Armenian-Azerbaijani deal and what the regional implications are. We'll head to Norway to hear about a political festival there. Then... Is this the final frontier? We'll examine how the nuclear arms race is going to outer space. And
EU's traveling all over the world, and it makes the management difficult.
The EU has proposed adding the Japanese eel to the Washington Convention. It's a slippery issue and one Japan is not ready to wiggle away from. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. A new peace treaty brokered by Donald Trump has been signed between Azerbaijan and Armenia in Washington, aiming to end 35 years of enmity. This agreement is predicted to significantly alter the geopolitical balance of power in the region. Well, Joshua Kuchera, who is a senior analyst for the South Caucasus at the International Crisis Group, joins us now down the line from Tbilisi. Joshua, it's lovely to have you back on the show. What are the key components of this deal?
Well, thank you for having me. So the deal that they reached on Friday is in fact they initialed the peace agreement that they've written. They have not signed it. So this is a potentially key distinction here. They announced kind of the intention to sign it without actually signing it. But then they've also agreed to dissolve the Minsk group of the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. This is sounds like an obscure bureaucratic move, but this is something that Azerbaijan has wanted for a long time because they also consider it to be a sort of effectively a claim on their territory by Armenia. And then the most intriguing thing that the two signed was to set up this transport route called the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. Again, this is quite complicated, but the long and short of it is there's two parts of Azerbaijan that are disconnected. Azerbaijan wants some kind of road and rail connection through Armenia to connect these two things. And it's been quite difficult for the two sides to figure out the details of how that's going to work legally and security-wise and so on. And so this agreement that they signed on Friday sets up the framework anyway. There's a lot of questions that remain unanswered about this, but they've set up the framework anyway for doing that.
And why is Iran concerned about this?
Well, so the Trump route, at least the route that everyone assumes that it will go along, is right along the Iranian border. And again, because we don't know very many details, we don't know exactly what the American involvement in this road is going to be. There have been some reports that there's going to be private security contractors, Americans, guarding it. We don't know that yet, but Iran is quite concerned about any kind of American presence right on its border, especially if that's some kind of security presence.
And what does it mean for Russia's influence in the region?
Well, overall, Russia's influence has declined quite a bit over the last couple of years. It remains to be seen whether that's a long-term development or not. But in 2020, the two sides, Armenia and Azerbaijan, had agreed, along with Russia, to do some kind of road like this. And Russia was the one who was supposed to be guaranteeing it. And that agreement, signed in 2020, was signed by Vladimir Putin and the leaders of the two governments of Armenia and Azerbaijan. Now, this agreement has been signed by Donald Trump, and with the idea that an American company will operate this road. So that right there indicates a loss of Russian influence on this specific issue, and it's going on against the backdrop of a bigger Russia decline in influence as a result of the Ukraine war.
I wonder if it affects China's Belt and Road Initiative.
That's hard to say. It could certainly. I mean, ideally, this is part of the various kind of middle corridor, Belt and Road connections connecting Europe to Asia. Um, there's a lot of things that have to happen before this road actually becomes useful. So, I mean, it's a little too early to say that, but I mean, in general, this is something that people in the region, Armenians, Azerbaijanis, and others, all are quite interested in. And the EU, for that matter, not only China, is improving the connectivity between Europe and Asia, especially bypassing Russia, which is now kind of legally difficult because of the war. So this would be potentially a key route between Europe and China. But like I said, a lot of the details have to be worked out.
What are the other benefits for Armenia and Azerbaijan? I mean, they've been enemies, really, for over 30 years.
Well, I would say that, in substance, what was agreed on Friday was not very deep, but symbolically, it was quite significant. I mean, the two men shook hands. They were smiling. This is not something you see them do before. And I think it could go a long way towards building trust and getting them to do the work that is going to be needed to bring a more substantial, lasting peace to the region.
And possibly nudging Armenia towards the EU?
We'll see. I'm personally a skeptic about the Armenian prospects for joining the EU, and I think a lot of people in Brussels are as well, and not to mention Yerevan. But I mean, Armenia is trying to diversify its security arrangements, its partnerships with other countries after a long decades or centuries of being quite dependent on Russia.
I noticed the name of the initiative, the Trump Corridor. Does it bring Trump one step closer to the Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, I mean, I think this was the hope that Armenia and Azerbaijan were kind of banking on, that they can get U.S. involvement by indulging this kind of hope of Donald Trump to win the Nobel Peace Prize. It's not up to me to say whether this earns it for him or not. And I guess we'll have to see how this actually turns out.
Joshua, thank you very much indeed. That was Joshua Kuchera, who's a senior analyst for the South Caucasus at the International Crisis Group. Now, here's Anita Riotta with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. Israel is facing widespread condemnation after an airstrike in Gaza killed the Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif and 4 fellow journalists. Al Jazeera Media Network has called the strike a targeted assassination of its journalists. Israel has defended the killings, alleging that al-Sharif was a Hamas terrorist who posed as a journalist. Semiconductor giants NVIDIA and AMD have entered an agreement to provide the U.S. government with 15% of revenues generated from chip sales to China. The arrangement serves as a condition for obtaining export licenses that allow continued access to the Chinese market. Police in Japan have issued a public safety alert. This after discovering the toy guns being distributed as prizes in arcade crane games are just as lethal as the real thing. The recovery of 16,000 Chinese-made devices is underway, with possession of the guns being considered a violation of the nation's swords and firearms control law. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thanks, Anita. Well, now let's take you to Norway's biggest political festival. It's where we find Bruno Kaufmann, who's global democracy correspondent at the Swiss Broadcasting Company. Bruno, hello, welcome to you. Where are you and what is this festival?
Yes, hello, Georgina. Yes, I'm in the south of Norway, about 300 kilometers south of Oslo. There is a city called Arendal, and I just arrived here this morning. This festival starts now. In a half an hour is the official opening, and it's over 5 days. Basically, everybody in Norway involved in politics, involved in business, involved in civil society is here to discuss what's up in Norway. There are more than 2,000 events during these 5 days, and it's a truly fascinating, let's say, festival for democracy.
How and why did it begin?
It was inspired, in fact, by a Swedish such festival, which was started by the former Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme in 1968. And then the Norwegians tried to copy that in a way, but it took like 4 decades. And in 2011, they wanted to do it first time, but then a terrorist attacked Oslo and attacked an island outside Oslo and killed so many people. So it couldn't start in 2011, but since 2012, this festival called the Arendal Week has growing, and now this year, because there is the election in just 4 weeks, it's a big thing.
As you say, it hasn't actually officially kicked off, but what do you expect the big themes to be that will emerge and some of the key discussions that will take place?
I mean, traditionally, it has been a lot about the role of Norway in the world, about how Norway, as an oil-rich country, can contribute to make the climate not worse. And this is a big tension for Norway because Norway becomes very rich through the oil. And now, for instance, this year, this connects now with the international debate about wars, because the Norwegian Oil Fund, which is the wealthiest international national fund with almost $2 trillion in it, they have invested heavily in Israeli war industry. And this is a big debate that this conflicts, of course, with the Norwegian government's policy towards Israel. So there's a lot of debate. And tomorrow, the Norwegian bank will announce if they will divest from Israel or not. And this is one of the big issues to be discussed this week.
Now, as you say, there are elections coming up in 4 weeks' time. So are we going to see pictures from the parties?
Absolutely. They are very present. I mean, the election already started. I just passed an election ballot station, so people can already vote here. And because, in Norwegian parliament, the parties, they are always in a lot of discussions with each another, because normally the government is not a majority government, but the minority government. This time now, the Social Democratic Party is in power, but they hold only 48 out of 169 seats in the Norwegian parliament. So they need to have agreements. They have to have discussions with all the other parties. So every party, of course, now, about 10 parties are in parliament. They want to pitch the people why the people should vote exactly for them.
And what about foreign involvement? Do you expect much discussion on things like the Russia-Ukraine war and also Gaza-Israel?
It's a very big issue. I mean, as I already said, it concerns also the Norwegian investments, but also, of course, security has become a very big issue, because Norway, you can say, is the only country which traditionally hadn't had any conflict or war with Russia. But now this tension in the far north between Norway and Russia, also into the Arctic, this plays a lot into discussions. And I will tomorrow head to Svalbard, where there is the celebration for the 100-year anniversary of the Svalbard Treaty, which has been a peaceful agreement between Norway and Russia and other countries. And this is now also at stake. So this is also playing into the discussions here and ahead of the elections.
And tell me, what happens around these discussions? Is there much else on at the festival?
Yes, it's a whole city full of, you can say, people looking for debates. There is basically every organization who wants to do something. They offer something here. I mean, they invite people to boat trips. You can do different kind of gymnastics with the trade union. So there's a lot of crisscrossing between politics and society, which, of course, for somebody who is interested in this, is a fascinating experience, because you see basically the people on the street, from the TV. And it's also, in a way, an attempt to go a little bit from this polarization that you don't meet your opponents and just are in your bubble. Here, everybody is in the same bubble.
And just speaking of politics and society and the intersection between the two, one debate we are seeing really flaring up across the world, really, is migration. Is that something that will be heavily discussed?
Yes, it's a Norwegian issue, because Norway, as it is a rich country now, has got a lot of immigration in recent years. And this has created, of course, in a country which was for a very long time an immigration country, and then a country which was basically on the sidelines of Europe and the world, has created a lot of discussions about how to live together with different cultures. And it's also a reason that the far-right Progress Party is possibly making one of its best elections and could be the party of the next prime minister.
That's extremely interesting. Bruno, thank you very much indeed. That's Bruno Kaufmann there. And you're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, the US, China and Russia are in a new space race, this time for territory, resources and nuclear power on the moon. American astronauts are training for the first lunar landing in over 50 years, while Beijing and Moscow have plans for a joint base. Is this science or a scramble for space dominance? Well, Tira Schubert is a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and an ambassador for the Science Museum. And you've taken the trouble to come in today. Many thanks. It's lovely to have you here with us. Tell us, what is driving the rush back to the moon? Is it research or is it rivalry?
Well, it's a little bit of both. It's like the first space race because the Americans were in a political situation where they wanted to beat the other Soviet Union, the other superpower. Well, now the big superpower is the Chinese. The Chinese only discovered space in 2003. The Americans and the Soviet Union had been in space since the 1960s, and their goal is to beat the Americans. So as soon as they focused on the moon, the Americans decided, yes, we must go back there. And this administration, the Trump administration, who loves superlatives, say they want the best part of the moon. And the best part of the moon is the lunar salt because there's water in craters. Water's the oil of space. And so they want to build a scientific base, which also has dual purpose as military, and the Chinese do as well. So they need power.
So that power then would come presumably from nuclear reactors?
Well, you can't do solar on the moon because you have 2-week-long nights, so that creates a problem. And yes, nuclear is the way to go, and it's sort of a logistical problem as much as anything else because you have to get all the materials up there. That means a whole series of rockets.
So how close are any of them to actually achieving this?
Well, that's a good question. The Chinese don't give much away. They put out some really interesting animations showing a wonderful space base where a moon base where the Chinese astronauts, the taconauts, will live and do research. And the Americans have put out some wonderful animations too. But when are either of them actually going to even land there? Before the end of the decade, I would bet. But will they be able to say, here we are on the moon? Is it going to be in Mandarin or English the first time that's said?
And will the shadow flutter the right way? We all remember the great controversy. I mean, can we take these ambitious timelines seriously?
Yes, there is. We do know a certain amount because we can watch the Chinese in space right now. They have a space station called the Tianjiang. There's 3 of them up there right now. But the Americans are on the International Space Station. They're up there with Russians and a Japanese astronaut right now. There's 10 people off Earth as we speak. And they say they're going to do the next phase of the Artemis mission next year. Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. Being a woman, she's very smart.
It's now emerging that actually Kennedy wasn't that supportive of the first moon landings initially.
Absolutely. He thought that he wasn't at all interested in space. He thought that it was just a way of beating the Soviet Union. He had a lot of political problems when he came into office. And NASA, the head of NASA, James Webb, there's now a telescope named after him out there in orbit, as you know. James Webb came to him and said, well, I have something that you could probably beat the Soviet Union at and score a big success for your administration. Let's go land on the moon. It was a political move, and Kennedy, of course, never lived to see it. It wasn't something that was a passion for him.
So could any nation realistically claim the moon?
Well, that's a really good question. There is the Artemis Accords. Americans love creating these treaties, but only a few nations have signed up to it. And international law in space is still a very flexible thing. But if you actually do have something on the moon or another planet, you're going to have to keep space around it in order to keep it going. The last time we had a problem like this is when the Portuguese and the Spanish competed for the New World, and the Pope was brought in to draw a line and say, yes, Portugal, you can have that bit, which is now Brazil, and Spain, you can have the rest of it. I don't think they're going to go to the Pope for this one, though.
I mean, I wonder if it is too late to set global rules for the moon. And also, given the nations involved, even if that were to happen, would Trump, Xi Jinping or Putin take any notice whatsoever?
Probably not, and nor would whoever follows both of those leaders. But actually, look at history a bit. There's been much more cooperation in space than competition. The Soviet Union and the Americans, the astronauts and the cosmonauts came to respect and really work together, and they are training together now. To this day, there's still Americans training in Russian, and there are still Russian cosmonauts training in Florida and Texas. So space does tend to often bring countries together in a surprising way.
So we're talking about national efforts, but what about private efforts? Because, of course, Elon Musk says that his aim is to go to Mars.
Yes, and there's some people that wish that that could be achieved very quickly, too. Yes, there's a vibrant private space sector. And in fact, the last soft landing on the moon, it's very hard to achieve a soft landing on the moon, only 5 nations have, was by an American private company, Intuitive Machines. And there are dozens of active space industry innovations going on, not just in the United States, but throughout Europe. So we depend on space. In fact, we wouldn't be speaking right now and to the people that are listening to us without the ability to use the communication satellites. Space is part of our lives now.
Absolutely, and will be a bigger and bigger part as we go on. Tira, thank you so much. That was Tira Schubert, who's a Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and an Ambassador for the Science Museum. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. The EU has proposed adding the Japanese eel to the Washington Convention, which regulates international trade in endangered wildlife. As the world's largest eel consumer and in the face of rising eel prices, Japan is now lobbying other countries to oppose the proposal. For more on the row, Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi spoke with Professor Kenzo Kayufu, who's an expert on eel conservation and sustainable use.
Actually, not only EU, but also Honduras proposed listing all ungulate eel species, namely freshwater eel species, on CITES Appendix 2. Under CITES Appendix 2, commercial trade is still possible as long as it is sustainable, both in terms of resource conservation and compliance with legal frameworks. According to the proposal, there are 17 species in the genus Ungula worldwide. Currently, 3 species of the 17 eel species, the American eel, European eel, and the Japanese eel, the primary eels consumed globally. All 3 species are listed as threatened on the IUCN Red List, and poaching and smuggling occur worldwide. This indicates that the international trade in eels is unsustainable.
Thank you. So, why does the EU want to list Japanese eel under Appendix 2 of CITES now?
One of the main purposes of EU is to protect European eel, because the population of European eel has been steeply decreasing. EU listed European eel in Appendix 2 of CITES. But after CITES listing, there are many cases of smuggling of European eels. Because we have 17 eel species in the world, and they have very similar looking. To identify the species morphologically is really challenging, especially after processing. So in some cases, people flout about the species. This is not European species such as American eels or Japanese eels for smuggling. I guess EU want to stop such smuggling. That is one of the reasons, I guess.
Yes, as you mentioned that I've heard that many of eels we see in Japan or East Asian supermarket are actually smuggled. So what creates this situation?
The simple reason is I think the demand is very strong, so the price is high. Currently, I think the most consumed eel species is American eel. American eel distribute in Northern America and Middle Americas, but we can find American eels everywhere in the world. Even in United States or in Canada, I found American eel made in China. It means that those eels were caught as baby eels in Americas, then traded to Hong Kong and farmed in China, and farmed and processed, then exported to the country where they born. So eels traveling all over the world, and it makes the management difficult.
I see. So to meet the high demand, they are smuggled in disguised as other species. If the Japanese eel does get listed under Appendix 2, what would happen then to Japan or East Asian countries?
If these species are listed in CITES Appendix 2, as a result, the distribution of eels might increase in some countries like China, which is the world's largest eel farming country. On the other hand, the supply of eels could decrease in countries like Japan, one of the world's biggest eel consumers. That means in East Asia, we have to collaborate among the range states of Japanese eel. But alongside with such collaboration, we have to collaborate together with the all eel range states worldwide. This is the biggest challenge we are facing.
Thank you very much. This was Ryuma Takahashi speaking with Professor Kenzo Kaifu from Chuo University for Monocle in Tokyo.
Many thanks there to Ryuma, talking about an issue that won't be easy to deal with. And there's plenty more twists in this tale. Oh dear, clearly time for me to be off. So that's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Anita Riata. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Mariella Bevan. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye and thanks for listening.